Hey, welcome everybody. This is Stephanie with Here to Their Ministries, and we are continuing in our series, our five-part series from Ephesians 4 on mobilizing the church through crisis. And I'm joined with my wonderful friend, Susan Freese from All In Ministries. Susan, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Stephanie. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. So we are on session 3 of a five-part series going through Ephesians 4 on decentralizing the church and moving the church out. Just a quick refresher, bringing you up to speed, Susan, on some of the things that we've talked about is Ephesians 4, when Christ died and rose again, he kind of repositioned the church in just a matter of verses. We've been focusing on Ephesians 4, 7 through 13, as he descended and then ascended. He gave gifts so that we could all become complete. And we're talking about the equipping gifts of the church. And with our current situation, we have seen a repositioning of the church from centralized on leadership and programs to now we're all doing it. And we really want to just encourage the church. So we've talked about prayer, and today we want to talk about evangelism. Now, my connection with Susan is on my first team to East Asia. In comes this woman, and she says, I'm going to teach you evangelism in 10 minutes, and you're going to love it, and you're going to know it. And I walked away going, how is that even possible? But I do. I knew how to evangelize so much better. And then you came to one of our partnership churches and taught an evangelism strategy. So this is something that you love, something that you do
Yes.
well. You tell me your passion. What's with this passion for evangelism?
Well, first I have to tell you, thank you so much, Stephanie, for letting me be here. But I want to thank you and your ministry Here to There, because you've had this faithful equipping presence for all of us. You've been around when we started our ministry. So I want to thank you for all that. I will tell you just quickly, All In Ministries, we are devoted to helping under-resourced women around the world discover that they're loved and valued and really have a purpose to know and enjoy God and then make disciples. And so we work with churches and local leaders. So we've seen evangelism on all different continents and how this type of model works. But I'm not going to lean more on a methodology. I really want to talk about how to go and get started. And everything started for me when I was a little girl. I grew up in the 70s and 80s during the Jesus movement. I don't know if you remember that. You're too young to remember that. But
I read about it.
There was this massive revival that started, and my parents had recently moved to South Florida, and they had grown up in the church, but they didn't have a personal relationship with God. And at that time in their life, they were not faithful to a church or even really knew much about how to develop a relationship. And so my father came to know Jesus at almost like a few different ways, but really grew in his love for the Lord in a revival type setting. And what happened was this man was just so spirit-led, but also very biblically faithful, and just had a passion for evangelism. And so as a little girl, I saw the gospel change people, and I couldn't get enough. I just saw how if somebody was presented the love of Jesus and the Holy Spirit was working, their life was going to change for eternity in front of my eyes. And so that's the greatest thrill there is to be used by God as a vessel that he works in and through. And so that happened at a young age. I wish I could tell you that I learned about discipleship as far as an all-in surrender. That came much later, but I did have a passion for evangelism for decades. Used to attend as every evangelism class that you could. Thought that if I just learned a new method that I would be able to reach my family. Most of my extended family are not believers. And so anyway, so I've really come to learn a lot about how to really effectively share Jesus with others.
I know for our churches right now, all churches want to have evangelism as a part of what they do. But it can be difficult. It can be scary. It can just be so many different things. Tell us some things that churches can be doing right now that their churches are so spread out. I know we're together online. What are churches can be doing to encourage and get their people to be evangelists right where they are in their homes and their neighborhoods, if they go to work or with coworkers?
Right, right. I think we've entered almost this new day, Stephanie, where we're seeing this engagement with each other and the world around us that we've just not had before. And it's becoming so easy, like what we're doing right now on Zoom, where it doesn't have to be hard. And I think that's one of the things that I see that is so successful around the world is when you keep things simple, it can be easily multiplied. And so for church leaders, how important it is to not complicate evangelism. I know I had mentioned I had taken so many courses on evangelism. I've taken conferences, everything you can think of, you name it, I probably took it. And it can be sometimes 13-week classes, and it really doesn't have to be like that. It can be just as short as 10-15 minutes to get the essence of what you're to say and how to say it in a loving way. And so I think if we can just keep things simple to help equip churches to, number one, how to start spiritual conversations. It could be as simple as, hey, how has this virus affected you and your family? Or it could be as, hey, has anybody shared with you the gospel? Or do you have any spiritual? And it could be just easy questions that can help people engage in spiritual conversations. The second thing is really equipping them on how to share their testimony. And I think people get intimidated by that, thinking, oh, I have this big, long, drawn out story, or I really haven't, like me, I didn't have this huge life change. I was a little girl. I heard about the love of Jesus. I wanted to respond to the love of Jesus and loving him back. That was it. Like, that's my testimony. And so I've now come to say, really be really spirit-led in how I share my testimony based on what I'm listening from that person, what their needs are. Yeah. There is a beautiful exercise I encourage everyone to do, and that is just to write out, maybe it's in a quiet time, all the ways you've seen. You want to get humble. I mean, you'll just be blown away when you list out how he's answered prayer, how he's been faithful, how he's changed your attitude, desires, heart, how he's given you wisdom or peace. And through that process, I've come to learn how, wow, I've seen him work when I had postpartum depression after my first child was born, or I had a big medical issue, or just in those, because when I've done that, I've been more spiritually ready for conversations when somebody brings up the fact, I'm going through postpartum depression. I've been there. I know what it's like. How are you getting through that? Well, I'm really at a loss. I feel like I'm in a pit. Can I tell you how my life was changed? To be able to be listening for conversations, because that's what God did in your own life. Yeah. So I think that's really important, but it doesn't have to be hard. A testimony can be 15 seconds. There was a time in my life where I felt hopeless and I didn't have any meaning in life. And then I received forgiveness by Jesus and chose to follow him as Lord. And now this incredible peace and meaning in life. Do you have a story like that? See, Stephanie, in just a few seconds, I shared my testimony, and it wasn't necessarily focused about me. It's really getting them to open up and then equipping people to share God's story in very easy ways. I don't know if you have taught on the 3 circles, but that approach is so simple and so easy just to be able to explain God's love story in a loving way. So yeah. I think it's important to keep things simple, equip the church, then model it yourself. In seminary, there was this book called The Power in the Pulpit that we had to read in our preaching class. And I remember thinking how much there is such influence in the pulpit. It's almost priority is in the pulpit, where if you as a leader are vocal about, I was just out here and saw my neighbor and I was just talking to them about how the virus is affecting them. Just easy ways for people to see, oh, I could do that too. It doesn't have to be a professional to be able to share Jesus. It's so important to make it very vocal. Whatever you speak about, whatever's important is going to come through, and what you say and what you write in your emails and what you preach and even in your classes. I'm making sure to share.
Asking those questions. How is this affecting you? People love when we ask them questions about them. I heard one just recently. It says, what are you putting your hope in during this time? Yeah. Because all of our systems are pretty much dropped out. Even the good ones, they've pretty much dropped out. And so when we ask people questions, they're piqued because they get to talk about themselves, but also the ways that it's impacting them. And keeping it simple, we don't necessarily have to know 25 verses or laws, but just personal ways that it's impacted us and how Christ has changed our life. I love it. But I think as churches, giving people a place to start.
Yes.
We're at our personal church, we're doing prayer prompts each week. This week, prayer walking our street, asking for God to open the doors for conversations. And so just simple steps to encourage churches, or to encourage the people in our church to get out and praying for opportunities, looking for them in such a way. You've been in ministry. You've been in a couple different roles of ministry: lay leadership, staff position, missions, evangelism. And I'm sure you've seen some wins, and I'm sure you've seen some fails as churches go forward. Give us a story or example of a time where church really rallied the people to just be intentional on evangelism.
Yeah. Right now, I'm in different disciple-making movement circles, and what I'm seeing worldwide is there are 3 major success factors for churches to explode in growth. And it comes down to, first, extraordinary prayer. So I was so thrilled that you said that about what your church is doing. I really think if we are serious about Colossians 4 type of, Lord, you pray, open a door, open a mouth, open their hearts, and really humble ourselves to asking this, that this becomes just a prayer that opens doors and changes heart before you even start those conversations. But that's what we are seeing, is God is readying the ground in answer to those prayers, but we have to be faithful in praying and asking. In fact, that's what Jesus had, a prayer request, right? He said, pray that God raises up harvest workers. We need to pray for more people to be engaged. The second key is really abundant seed sowing. So that is where we are engaging the world around us. I think we really have seen in this shift a direction of, instead of looking inward and more looking outward with the coronavirus crisis, and just seeing how there are so many needs. People are broken, they are hurting, don't know where to turn to next. And so this is an opportunity where we can really help them understand who they should need to put their hope in. And so it's important to be able to equip the church on how to go into the harvest. I think we as a Western church, we do a really good job on that, more of the discipling and the gathering. But in terms of the sending and the seed sowing, that's where I think we as a church can have a better focus on and being more accountable to each other. I think a lot of people talk about harvest and don't realize that it needs to be something where we prioritize in our life, meaning we go out and we say, okay, it's time to go in the harvest, and it is a Saturday morning activity or a Wednesday night, and we are walking the beach and going up to people and saying, hey, I have some really great news, can I share it with you? Or, has anybody ever told you about the gospel? Or just some ways to be intentional about seed sowing. And then the third is obedience-based discipleship. When people come to know Christ, they need to understand the commands of Christ. They need to understand how what it means to be a follower of Jesus, and this is part of their DNA, is sharing their faith with others. And of course, all their wonderful blessings about gathering into churches and growing and learning how to pray and studying the Bible. But those rhythms, those spiritual rhythms, we call them disciplines, are really so that we work with God, not for Him. We're working from a position of acceptance, not for acceptance, working with Him to advance the gospel. It's the greatest gift that I can't even believe that He would entrust to us, that we get to be a part of this life change in somebody's journey. And so those are really 3. That's where when I see a church exploding growth, they are getting extraordinary prayer, they are seed sowing abundantly, and they are really focused on obedience-based discipleship.
I love that first one about prayer. That's our first core value of the ministry, is everything starts with prayer, because that lines us up where God wants to go instead of what we want to do. But Amen. Our favorite verse, Nehemiah 1, you see it in 4 and 11. Basically, Nehemiah is saying, prepare the heart of the king before I even go and approach him. So asking God to prepare the hearts of the people you're going to talk to today. And our last team that we took to Central Asia, the mission partner that we worked with, he challenged us a month ahead of time. He said, I don't want to wait until you get here and then it takes 3 or 4 days for us to ramp up. He goes, 2 people each week. Every time on our call, as we prepare, you're going to tell me about 2 people you share the gospel with. So having those great expectations, because he's going to ask me the question, and I'm going to have to tell him I didn't do it. Well, why not? So creating some of those accountability expectations, it's a personal way to challenge us as well.
That's right.
I love it. Our team is currently reading this book, What's Best Next? And I read this awesome quote. I want to read it. It's from Matt Perman. And he says, systems trump intentions. And I love it. He says, you can have great intentions, but if your life is set up in a way that is not in alignment with them, you will be frustrated. The structure of your life will win out every time. If we don't plan for evangelism, we don't plan to go out to try to talk to people. My husband and I have gone and sat in a Starbucks before and like eagerly looked around like, who can I talk to? But constantly just praying, open the doors. And I think as churches, we just need to give people permission that it's okay that it's okay that you do this. We want this.
And people want to hear it, believe it or not. I mean, I think we have a culture that says in this Western world that, oh, it's not okay to share. This is not our work. God draws them, and we are just the vessel. When you go and you start talking, you will see people leaning in. They want to know, especially when God is working on their hearts. They will create situations. You are just being a part and being obedient in this, and you'll see this. It's the most exciting thing you can do is be able to just see how a life can change for eternity in front of your eyes.
Yeah. And as churches, there are plenty of resources on evangelism, classes, podcasts, books that you can give to your people. But if it's not a part of your system and your structure, it won't naturally happen. If it naturally happened, we would have already been doing it. And so as a church, consider where evangelism falls in your teaching platform, in your equipping times, in your promptings, whether now we're doing it all through social media. How are you prompting? How are you equipping? How are you encouraging? Susan, you recently did a talk on this for your ministry on spiritual conversations. Where could we find that conversation and just get encouraged a little bit more by you?
Sure. allinmin.org is our website, allinmin, and that's MIN, short for ministry.org. You'll see a resources page there that includes the how to start spiritual conversations, but also we have developed a tool that's free that you can call 10 steps to be a disciple maker, and it goes through very simple steps on how you can start conversations, how to share your testimony, how to share God's story, how to follow up. I think what your point about accountability is so critical, because nobody ever leans towards evangelism and discipleship. In fact, everything in our world and our system is trying to pull us away from that to being effective. And so we actually have a tool as well. This is a strategy that we've used for years called the Listen, Learn, Lord, Love. And what it does is it gives you a tool that you actually be intentional, praying through, okay, Lord, who in my life is far from you? And being able to pray through that. And then also talking about, okay, how do we learn from them? Being equipped on how to ask your questions and share your story. And then how do we love? And the best way to love it well is to share God's love story. And then also understanding that we are ambassadors of Christ and we are under the lordship of Jesus. And so being accountable to praying faithfully and sharing your story. And this tool is designed to be used in your Bible so that it can be pulled out each week with your group, small group, accountability group. Okay, who on my relationship map have I reached out to this week? And so something to where what you were talking about as far as accountability, that can also be found on our website.
Awesome. And what was the website again?
allinmin.org.
Awesome. Susan, thank you for taking the time to just encourage us and challenge us to make evangelism a part of our everyday life, and just to encourage our churches as they're navigating some of these new waters of how do I get my people confident and even stepping out in those. So thank you very much. Please visit and watch Susan's recent talk on spiritual conversations. But we thank you for joining us. Thank you.
It's a pleasure. Thank you, Stephanie.